Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's archive presents China Urban Legends, the Leifeng Pagoda. In the autumn of 2004, I was transferred to work in Hangzhou. My workplace was on Nanshan Road, less than a 10-minute walk from West Lake. The apartment was found for me by old Zheng, an old residence on the straight street outside Qingbo Gate, on the second floor, facing south. When you opened the window, you could see the tip of Leifeng Pagoda. Old Zheng was my colleague's uncle, a Hangzhou local, 76 that year, who had lived in Qingbo Gate for 70 years. He said this room used to be part of his family's old estate, but it was split off later, and had sat empty for several years without ever being rented out. I asked him why. He said, people who came to rent didn't like that it was too close to the pagoda. I said being close to the pagoda was a good thing, right by West Lake, nice scenery. Old Zheng gave me a look and didn't continue. Only later did I learn that for 3 generations, old Zheng's family had all been keepers of Leifeng Pagoda. The day I moved in was a Saturday. Old Zheng helped me carry my luggage upstairs. When he was about to leave, he stood in the doorway for a moment, then suddenly said, "Xiao Yang, let me tell you something. Remember it." I said, "Go ahead." He said, "When you walk at night, no matter how late it is, don't look toward the pagoda. There's something pressed down beneath it, and when it turns over, it doesn't want to be seen."
I didn't take it seriously at the time. I figured it was just an old man's superstition. Everyone knows the Leifeng Pagoda. It's from the legend of the white snake. The high-pinned lady white under the pagoda, and later the pagoda collapsed and she came out. Just a legend. But after I moved in, I realized old Zheng's pagoda wasn't the one from the legend. The Leifeng Pagoda at that time was the newly built one from 2002. The old pagoda had collapsed in 1924, and after that the site lay barren for over 70 years, leaving nothing but an earthen platform. In 1999, the Hangzhou city government decided to rebuild it. Construction started in December 2000. In 2001, they excavated the underground palace. In October 2002, the new pagoda was completed and opened to the public. When I arrived, the new pagoda had been open for just over a year. Its whole body was vermilion red, lit up at night, visible from far away, resplendent, like a new bride. Tourists all loved taking photos beneath it.
But old Zheng didn't call it the Leifeng Pagoda. He called it the new pagoda.
The old pagoda is the old pagoda, the new pagoda is the new pagoda, he said. Same name, different thing. I asked him what the difference was between the old pagoda and the new one. He wouldn't say, just shook his head.
Nothing happened in the first month after I moved in. I went to work during the day, came back at night, read a bit, went to sleep. The street outside Qingbo Gate was very quiet. After 9 in the evening, there was hardly anyone around, just the streetlights shining on the shadows of the plane trees. My window faced south, directly toward the Leifeng Pagoda. At night the pagoda glowed with lights, like a standing lantern, silent and still. Once I got up in the middle of the night to drink water and happened to glance out the window. The light at the top of the pagoda had gone out at some point, and the whole tower stood there pitch black, like a stick of incense that had finished burning. I stared for a few seconds and felt like something was moving up at the top of the pagoda, a dark, blurry mass, hard to say what it was. When I rubbed my eyes and looked again, the lights were back on. The next day I mentioned this to old Zheng. He was watering the flowers in the courtyard. When he heard me out, he put down the watering can and looked at me for a long time, then said, "You saw it?"
I said, "Saw what?" He said, "Nothing. Just remember what I told you, don't look toward the pagoda at night."
After living there longer, I learned that old Zheng's warning wasn't just for me. Grandma Zheng next door, 83 years old, had lived in the old house for over 50 years. On the third day after I moved in, she came leaning on her cane and knocked on my door. She shoved a handful of mugwort into my hand and said, "Young man, hang this on your windowsill. When you open the window at night, the wind can carry things in." I took it and asked her why. Grandma Zhang gave me a look and said, "Didn't your landlord tell you? Don't look toward the pagoda at night. He's a man of few words, but he says what needs to be said. What he doesn't say, don't ask." I thanked her and hung the mugwort on the windowsill. It stayed there until I moved out. After that, every time I came home late at night, the first thing I did was check whether the mugwort on the windowsill was still there. If it was, I felt at ease. One time I worked overtime until the early hours of the morning. When I got back, the mugwort had fallen to the ground. I picked it up and hung it back. I didn't sleep well that night. I kept feeling like something outside the window was watching me, and I woke up several times. After that, whenever I passed by Nanshan Road at night, I always walked with my head down.
I heard about the Leifeng Pagoda's history from old Zheng in my second month living there. Old Zheng said the Leifeng Pagoda isn't the one from the legend of the White Snake. The White Snake story was made up by later generations, but the pagoda is real. The man who built it was Qian Chu, king of the Wuyue kingdom. Qian Chu was the last king of Wuyue during the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms period. While he was on the throne, Wuyue didn't wage wars. They built sea walls and Buddhist pagodas, constructing several hundred temples and towers both inside and outside the city of Hangzhou. The Leifeng Pagoda was built in 975 AD, on the summit of Sunset Hill on the south bank of West Lake. Qian Chu built it to celebrate his concubine Lady Huang giving birth to a son, so it was originally called the Imperial Concubine Pagoda. And because it was built on Leifeng, the common people called it the Leifeng Pagoda. Old Zheng said that when Qian Chu built this pagoda, it was different from how other kings built theirs. Other kings built pagodas to suppress feng shui and pray for peace. Qian Chu, besides praying for a son, had another reason he couldn't speak aloud. By that time, the Song dynasty had already been established, and Wuyue was caught in the middle. Qian Chu knew in his heart this kingdom couldn't be held. He built the pagoda half to pray for blessings, half in resignation. The pagoda was built for the kingdom, old Zheng said, and also left for future generations. Qian Chu hid sutras inside the pagoda bricks because he was afraid that one day the kingdom would be gone, but the scriptures would still remain. The bricks of the Leifeng Pagoda weren't like other pagoda bricks. They were blue-gray, thicker than ordinary bricks, with a round hole in the middle. Inside the hole was a sutra scroll wrapped in oil paper, printed with the precious casket seal sutra. No one could count exactly how many scrolls were hidden in the tower. Legend says there were 84,000 scrolls, taking the meaning of the 84,000 Dharma gates. Old Zheng said his grandfather had personally seen the sutra scrolls inside the tower bricks back in the day. When the oil paper was opened, the scroll was rolled up, the characters woodblock printed, neat and orderly.
Within the bricks are sutras, old Zheng said, so old Hangzhou people all said the Leifeng Pagoda bricks ward off evil. If someone at home was sick, you'd put a tower brick under their pillow. If a child cried and fussed at night, you'd prop up the bed leg with a tower brick. Word spread from 1 person to 10, 10 to 100, and by the end, everyone wanted a brick from the Leifeng Pagoda.
When I heard this, a bad feeling had already started to creep into my mind. If everyone wanted to tear a brick off a tower, how much longer could that tower stand?
Old Zheng said that Qian Chu really did give up his kingdom in the end. In 978, Qian Chu went to the capital and offered the entire Wuyue kingdom, 13 prefectures and 86 counties, to the Song dynasty. History books call it offering territory to return to Song. The people of Hangzhou didn't blame him. They all said he did it to keep the local people from shedding blood. The year Qian Chu left, the Leifeng Pagoda had only just been completed for 3 years. Before he went, He stood beneath the pagoda for a long while and said something, but no one could hear it clearly. According to what the elders passed down, what he said was, "As long as the pagoda stands and the sutras remain, my kingdom is still here." Qian Chu later died in Bianjing and never returned to Hangzhou again. The pagoda kept watch for him. The people of Hangzhou also have an old saying, "Leifeng is like an old monk, Baochu like a beauty." The Baochu Pagoda is on Precious Stone Hill, tall and slender, standing gracefully. The Leifeng Pagoda is on Sunset Hill, short and stout, like an old monk sitting in meditation. One male, one female, one in the south, one in the north, they gaze at each other from across Westlake. Old Zheng said the elders told that these two pagodas were a pair, and the Baochu Pagoda had been watching the Leifeng Pagoda for nearly 1,000 years. In 1924, the Leifeng Pagoda collapsed, and the Baochu Pagoda stood alone for over 70 more years, until the new tower was erected.
Old Zheng seemed to see right through my thoughts. He nodded. You guessed right. That's exactly how people dismantled the pagoda.
The day Leifeng Pagoda collapsed was September 25, 1924. Old Zheng's grandfather was 15 that year, living at Qingbo Gate, less than 2 li from the pagoda. Old Zheng said his grandfather had told him the story countless times, to the point where every detail seemed carved into his mind. That day was the 27th day of the 8th lunar month. Autumn. The sun was still out during the day. A little past 2 in the afternoon, someone saw a wisp of white vapor rising from the top of the pagoda, thin, like smoke from burning incense, going straight up into the sky. The pagoda keeper thought there was a fire inside, ran up to look, but the pagoda was fine, nothing inside, and the white vapor kept rising, not dispersing.
By 4 or 5 in the afternoon, the mountain path on Shizhou Hill was packed with people, all there to see the white vapor. The vapor grew thicker and thicker, until the whole body of the pagoda was wrapped in a thin layer of white mist. Some people heard a sound from inside the pagoda, muffled, rumbling, like thunder, or like something turning over inside the pagoda. When the sun was about to set, a crack split open in the middle of the pagoda's body. The crack ran downward, passing the 3rd story, passing the 5th story, all the way to the base. The onlookers started running down the hill. Old Zheng's grandfather said he was young then, not afraid, and stood still on the mountain path, watching with his own eyes as the pagoda, with a huge crash, collapsed entirely. Dust and smoke rose up, blocking half the sky. When the dust settled, all that was left on the top of Shizhou Hill was a pile of yellow earth and broken bricks. The pagoda that had stood for 949 years was gone.
Old Zheng's grandfather said when the pagoda collapsed, a trail of white vapor emerged from beneath the base, hugging the ground and moving toward Westlake. It moved slowly, like a snake, and once it entered the woods by the lake, it was no longer visible. Later, people in Hangzhou said that at dusk that day, Lady White by Nyang came out from under the pagoda.
After the pagoda collapsed, the whole city flooded to Shizhou Hill to pick up bricks. Old Zheng's grandfather also went and picked up one. It had holes in it, and the oil paper inside the hole was still there. He unwrapped the oil paper, and inside was a scroll of sutra, the characters printed from wood blocks. Wrapped in oil paper, it hadn't rotted at all. He kept the scroll under his pillow for a few days, but in the end his father took it away, saying he would use it as a medicinal ingredient, to boil into water for his sick grandmother.
The bricks ward off evil, old Zheng said. Even after the pagoda collapsed, the bricks were still good. That was what people in Hangzhou thought back then.
The brick his grandfather picked up later passed into his father's hands, and his father passed it to him. Old Zheng wrapped the brick in red cloth and placed it on the long altar table in the main room, where he offered it for decades. That brick, I saw it in my 2nd month after moving in. Old Zheng invited me over for a meal, and after we ate, he pointed to something wrapped in red cloth on the long altar table and said, "Take a look, my family's heirloom." I opened the red cloth. It was a bluish-gray brick, twice as thick as an ordinary one, with a round hole in the middle. On the wall of the hole there were still a few yellowish-brown stains, like oil paper that had seeped into the surface over the years. One corner of the brick was chipped, revealing the darker interior body. I weighed it in my hand, heavier than I'd expected.
"This is a brick from Leifeng Pagoda," old Zheng said. "My grandfather picked it up. It's been passed down 3 generations." I said, "You keep it enshrined here, is it to ward off evil for the house?" Old Zheng smiled, didn't answer that, and said, "Feel it."
I touched it. The brick was cold. As I kept my hand on it, I suddenly felt my fingertips go slightly numb, like touching iron in winter. I thought it was my imagination, so I touched it again, still numb. Old Zheng was watching from the side and said, "You felt it, didn't you?"
I said, "Felt what?" "It remembers," old Zheng said.
That night I went back, and after I lay down, I couldn't fall asleep. That phrase "it remembers" kept looping through my head. The next day I went out of my way to look up old news about Leifeng Pagoda, and only then did I learn how crazily people in Hangzhou had stolen pagoda bricks during the early Republic years. Around 1918, a rumor suddenly spread through society that bricks from Leifeng Pagoda could cure illness, ward off evil, and keep you safe, that if a woman in labor laid her head on a pagoda brick, her baby wouldn't cry at night. Word spread from 1 person to 10, from 10 to 100, and people from hundreds of li around all came to dig out bricks. At first they dug up the loose bricks around the outside of the base, then they started dismantling the pagoda body itself. Brick by brick, the lower layer was hollowed out, and the pagoda stood there like a tree whose roots had been scooped out, still stubbornly holding itself up.
Old Zheng said his grandfather had set up a little stall selling tea at Qingbo Gate back then, and every day he watched lines of people heading toward Shizhou Mountain, carrying baskets, tucking hammers under their arms, and when they came back, their baskets were full of bricks. Nobody thought of it as stealing then, old Zheng said. Everyone thought of it as picking things up. The pagoda had already collapsed, the bricks were lying on the ground, whoever grabbed them, they were his.
In 1966, during the campaign against the Four Olds, the Red Guards searched house to house and confiscated all those feudal superstitious items. Old Zheng's family's pagoda brick was stuffed by his father into a cavity in the wall behind the stove that same night. The opening plugged with straw and smeared over with yellow mud on the outside. That's how it escaped.
The brick was hidden, old Zheng said, but the man wasn't. My father had worked at the tower base back then, and they dragged him out to be paraded through the streets for 3 days.
I asked what kind of work it was. Old Zheng said, in 1958, during the Great Steel Smelting Campaign, they were going to build a lime kiln on the earthen platform at the tower base, and my father was assigned to clear out the bricks. The pagoda bricks that came out were hauled away cartload after cartload. Some were used to build the kiln, some to pave the roads. My father said he saw it with his own eyes. As 1 cartload of bricks was being hauled away, water was dripping from under the cart, dripping the whole way. But that day was a clear, sunny day. Not a single drop of rain.
My back went cold hearing that, and I didn't dare ask anything more. In December 2000, the reconstruction project of Leifeng Pagoda began. Old Zheng's nephew, Xiao Zhou, was working as a night watchman at the construction site at the time, responsible for guarding the site at night. Xiao Zhou was 23 that year, just discharged from the military, and had gotten the job through connections. He told old Zheng that in the period before construction started, things kept going wrong at the site. First, when the bulldozer was clearing the pagoda foundation, it suddenly stalled mid-push. They checked for ages, fuel lines, electrical system, no problems at all, it just wouldn't start. The mechanic crouched on a dirt mound smoking a cigarette and said this place was cursed. The pagoda had been collapsed for 70 years. The grass on the earthen platform had grown taller than a person. What could possibly still be here? The moment he finished speaking, the bulldozer started up again on its own.
Then around the end of February 2001, The location of the underground palace was confirmed. Directly beneath the pagoda's center, less than 3 meters below ground. The survey team used Luoyang shovels to drill several test holes and confirmed there was a brick chamber structure below. On the night after confirmation, Xiao Zhou was on duty. At around 2 in the morning, he got up to make his rounds. When he reached the center of the pagoda site, he saw a patch of white mist on the ground, hugging the earth, a thin layer, like the fog rising from a lake at dawn. He shone his flashlight at it. The mist didn't disperse. The light couldn't penetrate it. He walked a full circle around it. The white mist was roughly 7 or 8 meters square, covering the exact position of the underground palace.
When Xiao Zhou told me about it, old Zheng said, I asked him, were you scared? He said, Uncle, I wasn't scared, I'm a veteran. I said, veterans know fear too. You remember this, that patch of white mist was the thing down below breathing.
On March 11, 2001, the underground palace was opened. Old Zheng remembered this date very clearly, because that night, Xiao Zhou called him for the first time ever. Xiao Zhou said over the phone, Uncle, they dug it open today. An iron casket, this big, wrapped in iron sheeting, rusted beyond recognition. The team leader said what's inside might be a national treasure.
Old Zheng asked him, when they opened the casket, were you there? Xiao Zhou said, I was there. Old Zheng asked, when it opened, was there anything out of the ordinary? Xiao Zhou was silent for a moment, then said, Uncle, the moment it opened, not a single person on site spoke a word. Even the wind stopped. Old Zheng said, when he heard that, he sat on his end of the phone for a long time before saying, Xiao Zhou, tomorrow you go tell the team leader you're quitting.
Later I read in the newspaper that when the iron casket in the underground palace was opened, inside was a gilded Ashoka pagoda. The body of the pagoda carved in openwork with scenes from Buddha's life, and within the pagoda were a gold coffin and silver casket, and inside the casket was enshrined a relic of the Buddha's hair. The newspaper said this was placed in the underground palace personally by Chen Chu over 1,000 years ago. The article was accompanied by a photo. The Ashoka pagoda sat squarely on its display stand, lit by lights, gleaming gold. I stared at that photo for a long time, and suddenly remembered what Xiao Zhou had said. The moment the casket opened, even the wind stopped. Something placed inside 1,000 years ago, taken out 1,000 years later, still new. As if it had been waiting all this time for this day, waiting for someone to invite it out. Xiao Zhou really did quit the next day. He told me that after the underground palace was opened, when he made his rounds at night, he kept hearing sounds from beneath the pagoda foundation. Thump, thump, thump. Like someone inside tapping on bricks with their fingers. 3 taps, a pause, then 3 more taps. 3 nights in a row. On the 3rd night, he couldn't take it anymore. He crouched down and answered toward the foundation. Who's there?
The sound never came again.
What happened after that? I asked. Xiao Zhou said, after that, I didn't dare take the night shift anymore. Uncle was right to some things, if you don't answer them, they just keep tapping at their own pace, but the moment you answer, they know someone can hear them.
During the 2 years I lived near Qingbo Gate, I walked along Nanshan Road plenty of times at night. I worked a lot of overtime, got home late, and Nanshan Road was the only way back. After the new pagoda was completed in 2002, Nanshan Road got lively at night, tourists, people out for strolls, folks walking their dogs, the whole street bright with lights. Lights were installed on the pagoda itself, shining upward from the base, making the vermilion body glow golden, reflected on the surface of West Lake like a woman doing her makeup. But every time I walked past the gate of Jingxi Temple and looked up at the pagoda, something felt off. The pagoda has 7 floors, and every floor has lights. But after looking at it a few times, I noticed that the light on the top floor was always dimmer than the ones below. It wasn't out, it was dim, like it was covered in a layer of dust. I mentioned it to old Zheng. He was shelling edamame in the courtyard and didn't even look up. He said, that top floor, it's empty.
I said, how could it be empty? The new pagoda has elevators and stairs, tourists can go all the way up. I'm talking about that layer, old Zheng said, not this pagoda.
I didn't understand what he meant. After he finished shelling the edamame, he clapped his hands and said, Xiaoyang, let me ask you, when you pass by the lake at night, have you ever looked at the water?
I said I had. Have you ever seen ripples forming on the water by themselves when there's no wind?
I thought about it. I actually had seen that. Once, getting off the night shift, I rode my bike past the lakeshore. The lake was as flat as a mirror, but rings of ripples were spreading across the surface, moving outward from the center of the lake, one ring circling another, like something deep underwater slowly turning over. There wasn't a breath of wind that night.
Old Zheng said, "That's it. The thing held down beneath the pagoda turns over on the 1st and 15th of every lunar month. When it turns, the waters of West Lake move with it, and the lights of Leifeng Pagoda go dim. You outsiders can't see it, but we locals, we've been watching it our whole lives."
I asked him, then what exactly is that thing?
Old Zheng didn't answer. He kept shelling edamame, and when he finished one handful, he grabbed another.
After a long while he said, "In the legend of the white snake it says Lady White is pressed beneath the pagoda. Our elders never believed that. What we believe is that there's something pressed beneath the pagoda, and this thing is connected to the waters of Hangzhou. As long as the pagoda stands, it stays down there. If the pagoda falls, it comes out for air. When the pagoda collapsed in 1924, it came out for air, and it stayed out for decades. In 2002, when the new pagoda went up, it went back down."
You ask what it is, old Zheng said, nobody knows. Not even the people who watch over the pagoda know. All we know is, as long as it's down there, Hangzhou stays steady. If it ever left, the waters of Hangzhou would have to change all over again.
The day after he said this happened to be the 15th of the lunar month. When I got off work that night, I deliberately took a detour to walk along the lakeshore. The lake was very flat. No wind. I stood at the edge of the lake and waited for over 10 minutes. Sure enough, ripples began to form on the water. One ring, then another, spreading outward from the center of the lake, slow and easy, like something down below had turned over in its sleep and gone back to sleep again.
On the way back to Qingbo Gate, I passed by Jingxi Temple. In front of the temple gate stands an old camphor tree, over 800 years old. It takes 3 people with arms linked to circle its trunk, and its branches shade half the street. I walked under the tree, and suddenly heard a rustling sound above, like something had jumped down from the tree and landed behind me. I spun around. There was nothing there, just my shadow stretched long under the streetlight. I looked up at the tree. The canopy was pitch black, I couldn't see a thing. But just as I turned to leave, I heard, deep inside the crown of the tree, a very, very faint sigh, like an old man letting out a long breath in the middle of the night. I stood beneath the tree, not daring to move, for a full 2 minutes before I slowly walked away. I stared at the lake surface for a long time, until the ripples had all faded, and only then turned to go home. That night, lying in bed, I heard dogs barking outside my window the whole night through. After old Zheng finished telling me about the thing under the pagoda, I couldn't sleep soundly at night for a while, but eventually I got used to it. Hangzhou is a place with plenty of strange happenings, and after living there for 2 years, I'd heard a bellyful.
What weighed on my mind most was the Qiantang River. That year, on the 18th day of the 8th lunar month, old Zheng came knocking on my door early in the morning and said, "Come on, let's go watch the tide." I thought we were just going to join the crowd, so I followed him onto the bus and we rode to the riverbank. That day the riverbank was packed. A sea of people all there to watch the boar. A little past 1 in the afternoon, a sound like muffled thunder came from far off, growing closer, and a white line appeared on the river's surface, pushing forward until it reached us. Boom! The tidal head slammed into the embankment, and the spray it threw up was a good 2 stories high. A wave of gasps went through the crowd. Old Zheng stood among the people, quiet and still. Only after the tide had passed did he speak. He said, "The Qiantang River's tide. It has a spirit in it. Wu Zishu. Have you heard of him?" I knew about Wu Zishu, a minister of the state of Wu during the spring and autumn period, who helped King Helu of Wu defeat the state of Chu, and was later put to death by Helu's son, Fuchai. I said, "He was killed by Fuchai, wasn't he?" "Not just killed," old Zheng said. "After he was put to death, his corpse was stuffed into a leather sack and thrown into the Qiantang River. When Wu Zishu was dying, he said, 'Gouge out my eyes and hang them on the gates of Wu's capital, because I want to watch the state of you come marching in.' After he died, the Qiantang River's tide grew bigger year by year. The old folks all say that tide is Wu Zishu's resentment. He resented the king of Wu, resented him for 1,000 years, and for 1,000 years the tide kept rising." I asked, "Then what about the 6 Harmonies Pagoda? Wasn't it built to suppress the tide?" Old Zheng nodded. The 6 Harmonies Pagoda was built in the Northern Song dynasty, on the riverbank. It's got iron bells hanging in it, and they've hung there for over 1,000 years. That's what it's for, to suppress the tide. The pagoda suppresses the tide suppresses the resentment, and the resentment suppresses the pagoda. They push against each other like that, and neither one will ever yield to the other. He paused, then said, "When my father was young, he ran a ferry on the riverbank. On December 23, 1937, the Qiantang River Bridge was blown up. You know about that?"
I said I did. At the bridge designed by Mao Yisheng, in service for only 89 days before they blew it up themselves to keep the Japanese from crossing the river. That day, my father saw it with his own eyes, old Zheng said. Before they blew the bridge, it rained for 3 days straight. On the night of the 22nd, the workers guarding the bridge said they heard a sound coming from the river, a low moaning, like a cow bellowing, and like a person crying at the same time. It traveled from upstream all the way to underneath the bridge, and it sounded beneath the bridge for half the night. On the morning of the 23rd, the order came down to blow it, and the bridge went up. It broke in 2 and fell into the river. My father said that the instant the bridge exploded, the tide on the river suddenly receded completely, exposing a huge stretch of riverbed. It wasn't until the smoke cleared that the tide came back rushing in with a crash, like it was late and hurrying to catch up. My father also said that on the night the bridge was blown, he ferried an old man in a long gown across the river. The old man sat on the boat the whole way without saying a word. When they reached the other shore, the old man stepped off and said just one thing: "The bridge is broken, but the water is still here. As long as the water is here, the road is here." My father asked who he was. The old man didn't turn around. He said, "The one who keeps the tide."
When I heard that, the hairs on the back of my neck all stood up. The river wind was strong, blowing hard enough to make my eyes sting.
I've been to Yufei's temple too, more than once. Whenever colleagues came to Hangzhou on business trips, they'd ask me to take them to see Yufei. The temple sits at the foot of Qisha Ridge. In the main hall stands the statue of Yufei, white robe, golden armor, seated upright and proper, as if alive. For figures kneel before the hall, cast in iron. Qin Hui, his wife Wang Si, Wan Qixie, and Zhang Jun. Their hands are bound behind their backs, enclosed by railings. Every visitor who passes spits on them. Everyone in China knows Yufei's story. Loyal service to the nation, the 12 gold edicts, Fengbo Pavilion, and heaven's light shines bright. Old Zheng said that when he was a kid, back in the 1950s, he saw an old gatekeeper at the temple entrance. He couldn't remember the old man's surname, only that he had a habit. Every year on the night of the 29th day of the 12th lunar month, he would sit all night in front of the loyalty cypress, keeping a single oil lamp burning, and not leave until dawn. The loyalty cypress is those few sections of dead wood under the east corridor of the main hall. Legend has it that when Yufei was unjustly executed, all the cypress trees at the temple withered overnight. Their trunks split open, revealing dark red grain inside, like blood. Later those cypress trees turned to stone, hard as iron, ringing when struck. People called them the loyalty cypress. I asked old Zheng why the old man sat there all night on the 29th of the 12th month. Wasn't that the day Yufei was killed? On the 29th of the 12th lunar month, in the 11th year of the Shaoxing reign, Yufei was granted death at Fengbo Pavilion. Old Zheng nodded. That's the day. The old man said, on the day Lord you left, the cypress trees all wept. We who are alive, we can't let a whole year pass without someone keeping vigil for him. When the old man died, no one ever sat vigil at the loyalty cypress on the 29th of the 12th month again.
In the 1980s, the temple underwent major renovation. Old Zheng's neighbor, Old Sun, was a mason and worked there for half a year. Old Sun told Old Zheng that the temple was fine during the day, but at night it changed. When he was on night duty, sleeping in the work shed in the side hall, he'd always be jolted awake in the middle of the night by a sound, clank, 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 like someone walking in iron armor, each step a pause, coming from the direction of the main hall, approaching the side hall door, and then stopping. He'd work up his courage, lift the curtain to look, and nothing was there. Old Sun worked at the temple for 6 months and went through 4 different coworkers. Every one of them said they heard it. Nobody dared sleep near the main hall. The crew foreman didn't believe in such things and went to sleep there himself for one night. The next morning he came out, his face ashen. He said nothing, and that very day moved the work shed outside the mountain gate.
What the foreman heard, no one knows, Old Zheng said. All we know is he never mentioned it again. Later, the day the work was finished and accepted, the foreman stood a long time in front of the loyalty cypress, then bowed 3 times. The day I went to the temple it was autumn, and there weren't many visitors. In the main hall, the incense burner before the statue of Yufei was crammed full of sticks, smoke curling upward. I stood there a while and suddenly noticed a detail. The statue's eyes looked downward, toward the direction of the hall's entrance, as if waiting for someone to come in. The tour guide beside me said the statue had been recreated based on old photographs of the temple. The original was destroyed in 1966. I asked her what the original had looked like. She said, in the old photos, the original statue was in the same pose, eyes also looking down. Old people say Yufei's eyes never look at the hall itself, only at the doorway. He's been waiting for his name to be cleared from Fengbo Pavilion. 800 years he's waited. He's still waiting. I stood a while in front of the loyalty cypress. Those sections of dead wood, dark and blackened, stood quietly beneath the corridor. An old woman was beside me, squatting on the ground burning paper offerings, murmuring as she burned. Lord, you rest easy over there. The people here, we still remember you. We know you were wronged.
The ash drifted up and settled all over me.
Lingyin Temple is on the west side of West Lake, at the foot of Feilai Peak. Everyone in Hangzhou knows Feilai Peak. It flew over. Legend has it that a long time ago, there was an Indian monk named Feilai who wandered to Hangzhou. When he saw this mountain, he said, "This is a small ridge of Vulture Peak in India." Somehow it flew here. So the mountain was called Feilai Peak, the Flying Peak, or Lingzhou Peak, Vulture Peak. Another legend says that when the monk Zheng was a monk at Lingyin Temple, one day he counted on his fingers and announced that at exactly noon the mountain would fly to the top of Lingyin village and crush everyone to death. Frantic, he went door to door begging the villagers to move, but they thought he'd lost his mind and no one believed him. As the hour approached, Zheng saw a family in the village marrying off a bride. He charged in, grabbed the new bride, and ran outside with her. The whole village chased after them, cursing him, and just as they ran out of the village, Feilai Peak crashed down with a thunderous boom, right onto the spot where the village had been. Zheng had saved them all. I heard that story as a kid. When I got to Hangzhou, a colleague of mine, a local named Chun, told me a different story about Feilai Peak. Brother Chan said there are over 400 statues on Feilai Peak, carved from the 5 dynasties through the Yuan dynasty, spanning more than 400 years. Most are in the caves, and the largest one is a Maitreya Buddha carved in the Song dynasty, bare-chested with a big belly, sitting there smiling. When he was a kid, he used to play there all the time. Once, near dark, he snuck alone into an empty cave. It was pitch black inside, so he felt his way along the stone wall until he touched a statue. There was something on its face. He leaned close to look. It was a pair of eyes wide open.
Later I looked it up, Brother Chen said. That statue, according to all historical records, has always been depicted with closed eyes. I never told anyone. I was afraid they'd say the kid was making things up. I asked him, so now, do you think you really saw it back then? Brother Chen was quiet for a moment, then said, when I got older, I went again. I found that exact cave, and that statue still with its eyes closed. But I stood in that cave for 10 minutes, and I kept feeling it was looking at me. When I came out, my back was soaked through.
In the winter of 2003, a friend came from Beijing and insisted on visiting Lingyin Temple at night. We begged the caretaker at the gate for a while before he let us in, saying, "We clear the grounds at 9. Watch the time." My friend was completely absorbed by the Buddha statues, and at 9 we got swept out with the rest. We came out of the main hall and headed toward the mountain gate. When we reached Lingyin Pavilion, I suddenly heard a sound, like someone striking a qing, a stone chime. Dang! It wasn't loud, but it was crystal clear, carrying far off into the night. I stopped and asked my friend if he'd heard it. He said he did. Does Lingyin Temple still strike the qing at night?
The caretaker at the gate overheard us and cut in. The temple doesn't strike the qing at night. After 9, the main hall is locked. Who would be striking it?
The 3 of us stood at the mountain gate, none of us saying a word. After a long while, the caretaker said, "Better go. This place at night, don't stay too long."
Later I told old Zheng about it. Old Zheng listened, silent for a long time, then finally said, "Feilai Peak flew here. If you know it flew here, then you should know that someday it will fly away again. The day it leaves, every pagoda in Hangzhou will ring once."
I asked why. Old Zheng said, because what's buried under those pagodas came here with it. When the peak goes, what's underneath it won't stay either.
Phoenix Mountain lies southeast of West Lake. It's not tall, but it's the dragon vein of old Hangzhou. During the Southern Song dynasty, the eastern foothill of Phoenix Mountain was the imperial palace of the entire dynasty. The forbidden inner court, 9 layers of palace halls, resplendent and magnificent. Back then, Hangzhou was called Lingyin, the capital of the Southern Song, the most prosperous place in all the world. Old Zheng said that when he was young, there were still old men on Phoenix Mountain who could point out where the palace had stood, where the Chuegong Hall was, where the Funing Hall was, where the Lingyin Gate was. By our generation, the mountain was left with only wild grass and ruins. Even a proper memorial tablet was hard to find. But the name Phoenix Mountain, when old-time Hangzhou people mentioned it, always carried a complicated tone. In 1276, the Yuan army broke into Lingyin, old Zheng said. The last emperor of the Southern Song was only 6 years old. The Empress Dowager held him in her arms and walked out of the city to surrender. On the day the Yuan army entered the city, a great fire broke out in the imperial palace and burned for 3 days and 3 nights. Some said the Yuan army set it. Some said the people in the palace set it themselves. The country was lost, the home was gone, and the palace could not be left to the enemy. The day after the burning ended, the Yuan army marched in and saw nothing but scorched earth. From then on, Phoenix Mountain never had another proper house again. It wasn't that people couldn't build, it was that they didn't dare. The old folks said the soil on Phoenix Mountain was burned soil, and beneath it lay an entire dynasty.
In the spring of 2005, on a rainy night, I worked late and took a cab home. The driver was an old hand in his 50s. As soon as he heard the address I gave, he said, "Qingbo Gate, all right, we'll take South Mountain Road."
The cab passed Wansong Ridge, and just before we reached the foot of Phoenix Mountain, the driver suddenly slowed down and asked me, "Young man, listen."
I rolled down the window and listened for a long while. There was only the sound of rain.
"I don't hear anything," I said.
"That's exactly it, no sound," the driver said. "On rainy days, other mountains have the sound of rain hitting the leaves, a rustling noise. Phoenix Mountain, on rainy days, doesn't make a single sound. I've been driving for 20 years, and this is the eeriest thing. The trees are there, the grass is there, but when the rain falls on them, no sound comes out." He said that when he was young, he once picked up an old man, who got off at the foot of Phoenix Mountain around 8 in the evening and started walking up the mountain. He'd asked an unnecessary question, "Grandpa, going up the mountain this late?" The old man said, "Going up to listen." He asked, "Listen to what?" The old man said, "They're rehearsing." He didn't think much of it at the time, took the money and left. Later he remembered. The old man was wearing an old-style Chinese jacket with cloth buttons, cloth shoes on his feet. When he got out of the cab, something fell out of his pocket. The driver picked it up and looked. It was a yellow paper, folded neatly, with 4 characters printed on it. "De Song Ye Yu." Great song, elegant music. "I was young and clueless back then," the driver said. "I kept the yellow paper, tucked it under the driver's seat. Later my son found it and asked what it was. I said I didn't know. After that, there was a stretch when I drove every night, running the Phoenix Mountain route, and I always felt like someone was sitting in the back seat. When I looked in the rearview mirror, there was nothing there. My wife said you should throw that paper away. I threw it away. After that, I never felt it again."
The cab passed Wansong Ridge, and the driver stopped talking. I sat in the back seat as rain beat against the window, and I suddenly remembered what old Zheng had said. This place, Hangzhou, was full of things pressed underneath. Something was pressed under a pagoda, something under a mountain, and something else under the river. They were all down there, quiet and still, waiting for something.
I've accompanied people to see 3 pools mirroring the moon several times. 3 stone pagodas stand in the center of the lake. The pagodas are hollow inside, spherical in shape, with gourd-shaped tops and small round holes opening through their bodies. During the day, they're just 3 stone pagodas. At night, lamps are lit inside, and the light shines out through the small holes, reflecting on the water's surface. 1 pagoda with 3 holes gives 3 moons, plus 1 in the sky and 1 in the water, so it's called 3 pools mirroring the moon. Old Zheng said the 3 pagodas were built when Su Dongpa was prefect of Hangzhou. At that time, West Lake had silted up badly. Su Dongpa organized people to dredge the lake, and the mud they dug out was piled into a causeway. That's the Su Causeway. The 3 stone pagodas were set in the center of the lake to mark the water boundary, forbidding anyone from planting water chestnuts or raising fish in that area, to keep the lake from silting up again. By the Ming Dynasty, the pagodas were already mostly destroyed. The 3 standing now were re-erected during the Tianqi reign of the Ming Dynasty. "The pagodas are new," old Zheng said, "but the position is old. From the Song Dynasty to the Ming to the Qing, 3 pagodas have always stood on that spot in the center of the lake. Think about it, hundreds of years, and the position never changed. Why?"
I asked why. "Because there's something under that spot," old Zheng said. "The 3 pagodas are to hold it down."
I asked what was down there. Old Zhang said that according to what the old folks passed down, there's a flood dragon under West Lake that had been cultivating itself for several hundred years and was almost ready to become a true dragon. A dragon has to enter the sea, and to enter the sea it has to pass through the Qiantang River. Once it crossed that river, it would set off a great flood and drown the city of Hangzhou. So Su Dongpa erected the 3 pagodas to pin down that spot in the center of the lake and keep it from leaving through West Lake. Later generations didn't understand. They only knew that 3 pools mirroring the moon was pretty, with the lamps in the pagodas shining on the water at night, ring after ring of glimmering light. Actually, those were the talismans holding it down.
Boatmen on West Lake, old Zheng said, when they row at night and pass between the 3 pagodas, sometimes they can hear a gurgling sound from under the water, like someone talking down there. The timid ones can't even hold their oars steady. All the old boatmen know, if you hear it, don't stop. Just row on through.
That summer, I got familiar with a boatman named Old Zhou and asked him about it. Old Zhou chuckled and said, "Old Zheng told you, right? He's not wrong. When I was young, I didn't believe in spirits. One night I ferried someone out to Hangzhou, and on the way back, when my boat reached the middle of the pagodas, I heard a gurgling sound from under the water. I stopped and listened for a long while. The sound was like 2 people talking, one asking, one answering. What was asked and what was answered I couldn't make out. I rowed a few strokes, and the sound followed me. I hurriedly rowed out of there. From that night on, I never went through the middle of the pagodas again."
What did the sound seem to be saying? I asked. Old Zhou thought for a moment, then said, sounded like it was asking, "What time is it now?"
Around that time, when I had nothing to do during the day, I often went walking to Lingyin village. At the entrance of Lingyin village stand 18 imperial tea trees, with gnarled, twisting trunks about 1 person tall. It's said that when Emperor Qiantang toured the south, he picked tea from these 18 trees, and from then on they were designated imperial tea. In the village there was an old tea farmer surnamed Hu, whose ancestors had guarded the tea garden at Wukong Temple. He brewed me a cup of preaching Ming Longjing and said, "It's good tea, but this tea from these mountains, drink too much and you won't sleep soundly at night." I asked why. He said, "The Longjing well. It connects through to West Lake. Where the well water runs strong, the ground underneath is hollow. And in hollow places things dwell." I later told this to Old Zheng. He was brewing tea at the time. His hand paused for a moment, then he said, "Remember this. All the waters of Hangzhou are connected. The spring at Hupao, the well at Longjing, the lake at West Lake, the river at Qiantang, underneath they're all one body of water. The road beneath Leifeng Pagoda also leads to this stretch of water. When it asks what time it is, it's asking when it can leave."
I asked, "So when can it leave?" Old Zheng took a sip of tea and said, "When the pagodas collapse on their own or when the people of Hangzhou tear them down themselves. Look at Leifeng Pagoda, it collapsed once, and they raised it again. As long as there are people building pagodas, it has to stay down there. Water can't be held down, but pagodas are nails driven into the water."
That day, his tea was brewed especially strong. I took a sip, and it was so bitter I frowned. In the spring of 2006, I was transferred away from Hangzhou. The night before I left, I went alone for one last walk down Nanshan Road.
The moon was beautiful that night, and there weren't many people by West Lake. I passed the entrance to Jing Temple and looked up at Leifeng Pagoda. The tower was lit up, golden and brilliant, standing atop Shizhou Hill, just as it had been 2 years before. I stood by the roadside looking at it for a long time, remembering what old Zheng had said. The thing pressed beneath the tower turned over on the 1st and 15th of every lunar month. The lamp on the top floor was always dimmer than the others.
Just as I was thinking this, the light at the top of the tower suddenly dimmed. Not went out, dimmed, as if something had passed in front of the lamp, blocking the light for a second, then it recovered. I rubbed my eyes and stared at the top of the tower. It was empty, enclosed by railings, nothing there. But just as I was about to leave, I saw a white spot standing by the railing at the top of the tower. White as mist, like a clump of moonlight, its shape unclear, it just stood there, facing my direction. I held my breath and watched for about 10 seconds. The white spot moved, as if lowering its head, then slowly retreated inside the railing, back into the shadow of the tower, and disappeared. That night when I got back, I didn't sleep a wink. Early the next morning, I went to say goodbye to old Zheng. Old Zheng was sweeping fallen leaves in the courtyard. When he saw me, he put down the broom and said, "Leaving?"
I said yes, afternoon train. Old Zheng nodded, didn't say anything more, turned and went inside. After a moment he came out, holding the pagoda brick wrapped in red cloth, and handed it to me. "Take it," he said. "Carry it with you on the road. It'll keep you steady." I said this was his family heirloom, I couldn't take it. Old Zheng said, "Passed down 3 generations now, that's enough. You're the last one to live in that room. The brick goes to you, consider it a keepsake." I took the brick. It was heavy. Old Zheng stood at the doorway, watching me put the brick into my bag, and suddenly said, "Little Yan, go safely. That thing under the tower, it's seen you." I froze, and asked, "Seen me?" Old Zheng said, "You lived in that room for 2 years, your window facing the tower. You looked at it in the middle of the night, and it looked at you in the middle of the night too. It knows you now." "It knows me, so what happens?" Old Zheng didn't answer. He waved a hand and said, "Go. Don't look back on the road."
I shouldered my bag and went out the door. When I reached the mouth of the alley, I couldn't help it, I looked back once. Old Zheng was still standing at the door, hands clasped behind his back, like an old tree. Seeing me turn around, he waved his hand again. In the winter of 2009, old Zheng passed away, at 81. His nephew Xiao Zhou called to tell me. Xiao Zhou said that in the last few days before the old man died, every evening he'd carry a chair out to sit at the doorway, facing the direction of Leifeng Pagoda, sitting until dark. On the afternoon he died, he suddenly said, it turned over. Then he passed away peacefully. In 2010, I went to Hangzhou again. Leifeng Pagoda was still Leifeng Pagoda, golden atop Shizhou Hill. I stood beneath the tower for a while. Tourists came and went, taking photos, making wishes. No one knew what was pressed beneath the tower. That brick, I've kept with me all this time. Sometimes at night, when I touch it, my fingertips feel a little numb, like touching iron in winter. I don't know if it's real or just my imagination.
Hangzhou has many pagodas: Leifeng, Liuhe, Baochu, the White Pagoda, one after another, nailed into the stretch of water. Old Zheng said, pagodas are nails. Water can't be held down, but as long as the pagoda stands, the thing beneath it is still there.
I thought about his words for a long time afterward. A pagoda collapses, and it can be rebuilt, the water goes away, and it will come back. But those things pressed beneath the water, how long have they waited, and how much longer will they wait? No one knows. Maybe they're not in a hurry. They've seen 1,000 years of people coming and going. Seen the pagoda fall, seen the pagoda stand. Seen one person after another, people like old Zheng, sitting at the doorway, facing the pagoda, sitting until dark. They have all the time in the world. The story's done. What do you think? If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day.